Welcome to Plutus Project-Based Learning 2023 from Gimbal Labs. Thank you for watching this video. In this lesson, you'll see how to create a Cardano NFT that adheres to the existing CIP25 standards. You will see one specific way to use metadata to mint Cardano NFTs. You'll also see that the standard for minting Cardano NFTs that reference some media like an image, sound, or video file is defined in CIP25 or Cardano Improvement Proposal 25. In this video, I'll give you some background knowledge to think about, but I'm not going to demonstrate how to actually mint an NFT. That's for you in the mastery assignment that follows this lesson. I'm excited to see what you accomplish and what questions you come up with as we take this learn by doing approach. In the previous lesson, we built out this diagram that shows that transactions take UTXOs as input, they create UTXOs as output, and they can include metadata, among other information, and that this metadata can hold arbitrary information in a transaction that's recorded on the blockchain. So now we'd like to investigate a specific use case for transaction metadata. It's the media NFT metadata standard on Cardano. Now, a few things to get started. First of all, you saw in the previous lesson that the metadata key can be any positive integer. But if we're minting NFTs, the key has to be 721. This helps Cardano applications identify NFT metadata on-chain. Then, the value must follow a special format. And that format is defined in Cardano Improvement Proposal number 25. Let's take a look. You can find all Cardano improvement proposals at sips.cardano.org. And as you've heard, this one is number 25, the Media NFT Metadata Standard. I really recommend reading through this carefully. I'll scroll down to where the structure of the metadata is defined, right here. You can see that this is a JSON object, and that the key is 721, and the value is this object right here. Inside of this object, there's JSON, and we have a further nesting of keys and values. The first key we see inside of this value object is the policy ID for some token. You learned about policy IDs in Module 202. And you have to use them like this to mint NFTs that comply to this standard. Then we have another object as the value from this key, and inside of that object, a new key, which is the asset name or token name. Now remember, on chain, we can see an asset as the policy ID and the asset name. If you're familiar with nested JSON objects, you might recognize that the way to access these asset details would be by writing policy ID dot asset name, which is kind of interesting when you think about how assets are represented with Cardano CLI. Policy ID dot asset name is what we see in that context as well. Finally, we have the actual descriptive information about the media in this NFT. Some of these fields are required, and some of them are optional. You can read more about that below. But what I see here, the name, the image link, the media type, a description, and then a list of additional files, these are all common properties in NFT metadata. You can add other information as well, depending on your use case. And if you're familiar with the Cardano NFT ecosystem, you know that projects have been creative with how to include other properties in this metadata. In the example below this video, we're going to keep it pretty simple by not including too much extra information, but I wanted to show you a few things. First, let's talk about where images are hosted when it comes to minting NFTs. You can see right here that the image link is to a simple website, in this case gimbalabs.com, where a picture of the Gimbal Labs G is hosted. We can see it here. The problem with this image link is that it's not permanent. The Gimbal Labs servers could go down. We could decide to delete this image right here. Or Gimbal Labs could cease to exist. And in that case, what would happen to this domain and everything hosted on it? In SIP25, if I scroll down to the details about the image property, you can see that IPFS is suggested, but it's certainly not required. Links to images can be typical HTTP addresses, or they can be IPFS or Arweave addresses. So where should you store your NFT images? What I really want you to understand now is that there's no formal specification in SIP25 about where or how images are stored. In many NFT communities, there is an expectation that images are stored on some decentralized solution. So the example I'm showing you right here with the Gimbal Labs hosted G probably would not inspire confidence in NFT collectors. But that's a social agreement, and it's not enforced on-chain or even in this CIP. And for everyone developing on Cardano, it's important to be able to distinguish between unchangeable features of the underlying Layer 1 blockchain protocol or agreed upon standards like this one that are built upon it, and then even to informal community standards. For example, where image files are hosted. If you'd like to learn more about IPFS and Arweave, some links are provided down below. It's beyond the scope of this lesson to dive deep into all of these, and with a little bit of research, you can find great documentation about all of these systems. Moving back to our example, another thing I'd like to point out is this part right here. You can see that this is a list of strings, and this is how you handle any string that's longer than 56 characters in Cardano transaction metadata. You can simply split a string into multiple substrings and include all of them in an array. That's why when I look at the metadata standard, I can see that my options for image, for example, or description can either be a string or an array, or a URI or an array. Sometimes an address on the internet can be longer than 56 characters, and that's why we must have the option of using arrays right here. Focusing a bit more on what's written in the SIP, I'd like to highlight two more things here. First, we can see that the media type and files properties are optional. Let's look at those. The media type describing our image, this part's optional, and the additional list of files is optional. You can get away without this. But look at what it says. The source property inside files is a URI pointing to a resource. It could be another resource, right? So you can have multiple images or multiple image sources on a given NFT. And if you do use this approach, it's common practice to include a higher resolution image. This is what allows user-facing applications to have thumbnail images that are small file sized and load quickly versus the higher quality or higher resolution images that fans of digital art might expect. Finally, let's look for a moment at how to retrieve metadata for a specific token. In the next lesson, we will compare a different Cardano improvement proposal to this one, and we'll start to compare these different processes. It says here, a third-party tool can fetch the token metadata seamlessly. In other words, someone is going to have to build applications that agree with this standard so that people can see NFTs like they expect to. And when anyone builds such a tool, an application, a wallet, for example, here are the steps. First, you'll have to look up the mint transaction for the token in question. On the mint transaction, find the metadata and find the 721 key. Note that transaction metadata can include several different keys, where one of them is 721, but others are included as well. Then, within that 721 key, look for the policy ID in question, the asset name in question, and now you'll be able to access the metadata for this token. This is such a critical point to understand. Without application developers who follow these steps, it doesn't matter what's on chain. You've already seen how to mint native assets. Once you know how to do it, it doesn't take very long. And you're learning now about how to include metadata. We can put all sorts of tokens and metadata on chain, but in order to have the experience of looking at NFTs in applications or in our wallets, developers have to create tools that follow this standard so that NFT collectors can have the experience they expect. So let's bring it all together. What's required to make a Cardano NFT? Well, you have to construct metadata that follows the SIP25 standard. You must create a minting script and derive its corresponding policy ID. This is what you saw how to do in Module 202. And you must prepare a link to an image or media file hosted somewhere. So what's not required or explicitly specified? Well, it doesn't matter what kind of minting script we use. As long as you have a policy ID, you can mint NFTs. In the previous module, you saw how to use native scripts and Plutus scripts to mint tokens. Both sorts of scripts work here. Your script can require multiple signatures, but it doesn't have to. Many NFT communities like to see that there is a multi-sig minting policy, but nothing about the protocol or SIP25 specifies that NFTs have to be multi-sig. And in the very same way, the image, it could be hosted on decentralized storage like IPFS or Arweave, but there's no technical reason that it must be. So what are we going to do with all of this information? Two things. One, you can keep learning. In the mesh minting tutorial shared in the previous module, you might have noticed that this is not just about minting any old assets. This tutorial will take you through the entire process of creating a series of NFTs. So if you're interested in front-end application development using Mesh, I certainly recommend following through with this tutorial. If you've enjoyed exploring Game Changer, you can see that NFT minting is built directly into the wallet. And I bet that you can get it to work if you tinker a little bit. For a hands-on example of minting your first NFT with Cardano CLI, make sure to navigate to the assignment that follows this lesson. This is a guided mastery assignment like some of the ones you've seen previously. A shell script is provided, as well as all the instructions you need right here. What you're going to do is mint an NFT with a Plutus minting script that has certain validation rules. There's a link to the minting validator here. And if you navigate to where the minting validator is defined, you'll see a couple of constraints. Only one token can be minted at a time, as defined with check minted amount. The input must include your PPBL 2023 token. This is the one you minted in module 100. So you're going to have to send it back to your CLI wallet. And finally, the name of the new NFT you mint must match your PPBL 2023 token, just without the 3-digit number at the beginning of the token name. Perhaps you've noticed that there's a 222 at the beginning of the name of your PPBL 2023 token. Why is that? Well, that's because your PPBL 2023 tokens are not SIP25 NFTs. They actually follow a new standard called SIP68, and that's what we're going to investigate in the next lesson. So I hope you have some fun with this mastery assignment and can successfully mint your SIP25 PPBL NFT. And when you finish that, we will be ready to explore SIP68 together. See you soon.